Hi, and welcome to another session of Vision of Growth. I'm your host, Larry Sassano. I represent the Economic Development Council serving Okaloosa County as its president, and it's a pleasure to have you watching our show today. Today's show is a little different. I think you'll really enjoy it. We have our special guest speaker, Swoope, who is the Secretary of Commerce for the state of Florida and the President and CEO of Enterprise Florida. Gray talks about a new perspective for economic development in Florida. I think you'll enjoy this. We do a brief live taping with him, and then we go into the show. So please sit back and enjoy the next 28 to 30 minutes. We just completed our roundtable breakfast with Gray as our featured keynote speaker, and what an awesome presentation he made. And his topic was really about new perspective of economic development for Florida. Can you just kind of talk about that, Gray?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. Larry, being serving as your Secretary of Commerce, I get to see a lot of the state of Florida. And as you're out and about, we're hearing people talk about, this is a time that economic development is important. Yes. For so many years in our state, we've really taken for granted the growth and where it came from and the jobs. And you're at 3 or 4% unemployment, people really don't care. But here today, unemployment rate's still over 8%. For the state, it's 10%. We're on the right track. We're making we're doing the things necessary to get us back on the right track. But people are talking about now is the time to really elevate our game, diversify our economy, hold on to what we have, being aggressive in economic development. And you guys do such a wonderful job here, but we want to be your state partner, and we're really working hard to do that.
Well, I tell you, it is a partnership, and you're the leader. And so we appreciate really you being here and the governor putting you in those positions, because you've already lifted the state economic development awareness greater than I've ever seen it in a number of years. So I want to just, before we clue in on some of your presentation, I'd like to ask you to maybe highlight a couple of things that you do talk about in your presentation today. And you talked about cultural change in Florida. What is that?
Well, again, I go back to what I just said. I think for so long that our state just took for granted its growth. And so, when real estate was booming in the state, construction industry was going, the tourism, it was driving a lot of our economy. Yeah. And of course, in 2008, when that market went soft, we saw the unemployment lines start getting longer, the unemployed numbers growing. And so we knew that we had to do things different. So I like looking at economic development as being a team sport. The head of that's our Governor Scott and his leadership, and how do we make our climate the #1 job generating climate in the state. And what I'm finding out is there are a lot of people in the state and a lot of our counties, of our 67 counties, that are interested in it now, saying, you know what, you're right, we don't want to have to go through this again. We want to diversify our economy. We want to have other jobs in our economy as well. And I'm certainly not saying that these other sectors aren't important. They're a very important part of the Florida economy, but at the same time, we want to grow in areas like aviation, aerospace, and what you're doing here. The defense, homeland security, and defense sector. We want to grow in technology companies, clean tech, IT. There are great opportunities in the state to really elevate those sectors.
Well, you mentioned the point about the job growth. Really, that's what it's all about in economic development, as you know better than I. And just to have you as a partner in Florida's Great Northwest, and I think that audience today, what they heard you say was so important a message, because we say it all the time. They hear it from us, and maybe sometimes it goes in deaf ears, but when they hear it from the head man like yourself, who represents the entire state here, 19 million people, I think that makes a difference. You're right, and you mentioned also, I thought really interesting about life sciences, that Florida has the second fastest growing life sciences sector in the country.
That's correct. And I think people from the outside our state, and even Floridians, we sometimes don't think about what's happening inside of our state. We think of our beaches, we think of our warm weather, we think of the things that we just take for granted, and we're certainly proud of that. But there is a business climate in the state that is growing, and one of those sectors in this growing business climate is life sciences and biotech. And so, the state of Florida was the second fastest growing percentage-wise in life sciences of any state in the union. The number one was, I mentioned this, was Alaska. Alaska, I can't remember the exact number, but they jumped from maybe 2 companies to 9. I wouldn't call that a cluster of biotech or life sciences, but we have a very strong cluster in the state, and it's diverse. It's around the state, and it's growing, and we want to continue to support that because that is an industry that's going to grow. It's going to have jobs for our college graduates, and it has a lot of economic impact with that sector as well.
Absolutely. And I think finally, before we turn it over to the taping that we did today, as you mentioned one project in Tampa, I think that's a great example of what the speed of getting a project approved, and that was with Tom Warner with the back office operation. Can you just tell our audience about that?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. But first of all, let me tell you, Okaloosa County, you guys do a good job on speed. The problem in the past has been the state. And can the state get the process done quickly? Tom Warner is a great example of that. In the past, I call it a disjointed approach to economic development when you had 2 bodies that were working in Enterprise Florida, the business development team working the project like Tom Warner, and then it would have to be approved by the Office of Tourism, Trade, and Economic Development. With the reorganizational structure, these bodies are working together. So again, as I said in my remarks earlier this morning, Enterprise Florida would finish the application, send it to this office, and you'd have to wait days, months for approval. And company, they can't do that. Tom Warner was a competitive project, was looking at Atlanta versus Tampa, Hillsborough County. The Hillsborough, Tampa Hillsborough EDC, Enterprise Florida, and our state team worked hand in hand, so that when we finally came to the conclusion this is what it was going to take to put 500 jobs there, this was the package. So it was from Enterprise Florida. The application was delivered to the public entity on September the 6th. It was approved on September the 13th. The governor signed it on September the 15th, and we announced 500 jobs on September the 20th. That's how you do business.
That's right.
And the people in Atlanta that we were competing with, they were surprised. They were shocked that Florida could put that together that quick, because they vote for years that, oh, yeah, that's Florida, you'll never get the deal done. And so, you can look at the Atlanta Constitutional Journal on the 21st. If you want to go look at a copy, you'll see on the front page and also the headline of the business section about Florida beat Atlanta for those jobs. And as I shared in my remarks, I told my friends up there that was the shot fired across the bow. Well, we're back in business in this state.
Well, see, that's what's going to work for the whole state, and that's how we're going to help the governor and yourself create those jobs. So that's just a little bit of what Gray talks about today. So please now tune in and listen to the rest of this exciting presentation in front of the Economic Development Council's Roundtable Breakfast membership. Again, my guest, Gray Swoope, Secretary of Commerce, President and CEO of Enterprise Florida. Gray, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Larry.
Thanks
you very
for
much.
joining us.
Let me start by just saying there is a cultural change going on around the state in business and economic development. And I'm very fortunate to get to see that. I've been on the job now for 10 months, I think, something like that. And one thing I've been able to do is get out and know this state. So I have a place in Tallahassee. Left there bright and early this morning. By the way, I hate Eastern time. My body is made for Central time. But I'm never there. I'm out in the state visiting with people and talking about what's going on. And I'm telling you, there is just a shift in thinking in this state. For so many years, our economy has been so good. And it's been good based on traditional things that we're very familiar with in this region, that we've become almost just so reliant on it that we just didn't think beyond what might happen if some of these things went away. And so as we're looking forward now, people are beginning to embrace what we're doing in economic development. And of course, here in the Panhandle, you guys have always been good at it, because you just look up to the north here to Alabama or Mississippi or Georgia. Those states are always focused on economic development. And I know sometimes it's frustrating here because you have other parts of the state may not be as focused on it, but you guys have been focused on it. But I'm telling you, there is a shift in thinking around the state. you're seeing that. Of course, Governor Scott has a lot to do with that. When you run on a platform of creating jobs, you talk about 700,000 jobs that you're going to create in 7 years, that gets people's attention. And so as I'm talking to people, and we talk about the way we've been doing economic development for so many years, it's kind of been a laissez-faire, approach, in my opinion, to economic development. It's been disjointed. It's not really been focused like we should. And so Governor Scott and this team, we've been focused on getting the economic development group together and really laser focused. And so, I kind of always think about the Einstein's definition of insanity. Everybody in this room knows what that is. Continue doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result. And that's kind of what we've been doing in economic development. But I'm telling you, it has shifted. People say it is time to do something different. And so we're seeing that. We've seen with Governor Scott's leadership and certainly the legislative delegation, this delegation here in particular, helped lead the way in shifting how we look at economic development in this state. And so in just 11 months, we've seen already just this thinking is already having an impact on this state. We've gone from last December of an unemployment rate of 12% to 10%. Is 10% acceptable? No. But we are moving in the right direction. And if you look at about 135,000 private sector jobs added to the state economy, if you net that out, that's 125,200 net new jobs, but who's counting? I'm counting. But we're making progress. And so as we're putting the team together, I look at the state of Florida, and we're so strong in so many areas. You look at our defense industry, which, by the way, is a $60 billion industry in the state. You look at what's going on in space. You look at technology. Our life sciences sector right now is the second fastest growing sector in the United States. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but if you look at the last 5 years percentage growth in life sciences, the state of Florida is number 2 in percentage growth. Alaska's number 1. They jumped from like 2 to 9 companies, and so percentage, they're number 1. I don't count them because we've got about 800 companies, but we're making changes. So you look at all that's going on in this state and the things that we can brag on, and I tell you, it's time that we brag upon our economic development team and the professionalism and the aggressiveness that we're doing. So our team's been working on that. As I said, I like to think of Governor Scott as the Chief Economic Development Officer. Some call him the Jobs Governor, the CEO Governor. I just call him the Chief Economic Development Officer because every single day he's interested in what we're doing, who we're working with, picking up the phone. If there's companies that are thinking about moving or thinking about expanding here in the state, he's calling them. He's talking to them. Talking CEO to CEO, have you thought about this? Do we need to do this? What can we do to help your business? And in fact, yesterday we had one of those such calls, and we were going through the call, and he got through. He said, okay, let me summarize this. We need to do this and this. And the company said yes. He said, okay, we're going to call you back next week, 4:30 on Wednesday. We'll give you an update on where we are. That's working. And he's doing that every day. So that is helping change our culture. The other thing is that in economic development, that we've realized in this state, it's a team sport. We've known that outside the state, people that do economic development, that you have to work together. But in this state, we're beginning to realize that we have to work together. So our public-private partnerships, people like Space Florida, Visit Florida, Enterprise Florida, DEO, even Herschel Vineyard and Department of Environmental Protection, Department of Transportation, all of us talking, communicating, working together to create jobs. And I'm telling you, those discussions are happening. We pick up the phone, we talk about things daily, where can we help each other, and that's happening. So that's part of this vision, not just the reorganization, but this vision and how we work together. The other thing that you have to look at when you're putting together a statewide economic development organization is so how does DEO, how does Workforce Florida, how do they fit into this process? And so I like to think of economic development as this. There's 3 phases. The first phase is the product development. That's getting your product ready. That's education, that's workforce training. Those are things that Workforce Florida is very involved in. It's things that DEO is involved in through the Agency for Workforce Innovation that's now rolled up in it. It's preparing your product, and there's much more to that, but I'm just kind of simplifying it this morning. Think about it from that standpoint, and then you move into the business development side, and I told you just a little bit about Enterprise Florida, but that's the domain that they really operate in. And then there's the service after the sale. That's the area that DEO, the compliance side, it's continued workforce training, and then you have other entities around the state that fit into those three areas, so everybody kind of understands and where they play in that, and it's staying focused on the customer. So once you get the structure in place, then the question becomes, where do the jobs come from? And so I like to think of the job creation as really, you can really think of it in three areas where we can kind of put programs together and focus on job creation. One that we'll talk a lot about this morning is what I call the competitive job sector. And those are projects that Larry and his team work with. It's ones that you'll read about in the newspaper where company ABC is considering expanding or relocating, and people are reading about it. Competitive projects. And so those projects typically are going to look at various states. They're going to look at various locations. They're the ones where Dr. Harper and the BP money that can also influence and impact a decision. It's where incentives come into play, but competitive projects. And so how do you compete in that arena? Well, we have to be aggressive. We have to have a professional team. We have to be responsive. And so if you look at the state of Florida in the past, that's an area that we just haven't really been strong in. Again, it goes back to kind of being a little complacent and not being aggressive. And I can tell you, and you know this, these other southern states that we compete with, they get it. They get it. And so they're very nimble. They're flexible organizations. They can look a client in the eye and say, Jim, if you want to bring your company here to the state of whatever, this is what we're going to do, and I can guarantee it's going to happen on time and on budget. And that's something we haven't been able to do before reorganization of the state, because the process worked, that you finally agreed upon a project, you finally got the deal together, and so that was done by Enterprise Florida. Then you would take it over to the Office of Tourism, Trade, and Economic Development, say, okay, guys, now you got to approve it. So then they'd start the process all over. Well, who's the CEO? Tell me about the company. Look at the finances. Pick up the phone and start calling. Week 1, week 2, week 3, tick, tick, tick. Companies can't wait. And so some of these projects were taking months for approval. What do you think the companies were doing? I'm just going to go up the road here to Alabama. They told me last week they can get this done, so we're just going to locate here in Dothan. You know that. Well, I'm telling you, that has already changed. And I like using Time Warner as the example in Tampa. It's a great example of how our team is working together. Time Warner, on September the 6th, we took this to the Office of Tourism, Trade, and Economic Development, already that time functioned as a division of DEO, even though it wasn't October 5th yet. October the 6th, application approved on the 13th, the governor signed on the 15th, and we announced it on September the 20th. That's how you do things. And so I like using that as an example, because guess what? We got a call from the Atlanta Constitutional Journal. We got a call from Atlanta Business Journal, like, what's going on in Florida? They've never seen that. They've never had to worry about us as competition. I told both reporters, I said, just consider that the shot fired across the bow. We're awake down here, and we're going to compete for jobs. And so our team is working together in the competitive project side. The competitive project side also has to look at what's existing in this region of the state. You've been talking about it. We're going to talk about it further this morning. You've got to look at what's happening in the defense industry. It's your economy in so many ways. There's the private sector side that goes with it, this federal side of it. We have to look at that from a competitive standpoint. You're very fortunate that David is, Dr. Gesh is chairman of the Florida Defense Support Task Force. You've got 6 of the 13 members from this region. The state recognizes the importance of this region, and it is important that that group stays working together, will not get divided, and work together as a state that we can protect what we have here. And so I'm excited about that work, but those are competitive jobs that we're going to have to, unfortunately, be competing with our resources on the defense side of other areas in this country to retain those jobs. And I'm telling you, we're going to compete, we're going to be ready, we're going to be prepared for it. And so your leadership from here, we're looking forward to working with and doing that. The second area of job growth that people take for granted, if they don't think about it, is what I call facilitated growth. Facilitated growth is where a state makes a conscious decision to invest its money, to facilitate jobs in those particular areas. One of the great examples, and you guys benefit from it, you had a great summer, is tourism. The state of Florida chooses to invest $35 million every year. Or not every year, it was last year. Was matched by a little bit more than one-to-one match from the private sector last year. So you had over a $70 million marketing fund for the state of Florida. And then you also had some BP supplemental money. But that has facilitated growth. It generates jobs. So we can easily measure that. I like teasing Chris Thompson that he has one of the programs that's the easiest to measure because you can go look up how many heads are in beds at any given time. If people are here in our hotels, they're staying here, we can count that. We can figure out economic impact real quick. And you see that real quick. Those are dollars turned fast. International trade in this state has a huge part of our economy. It is going to play an even greater role. There was a report that came out, I think it was the day before yesterday, that showed that Florida is on track to have another banner year in trade next year. And you think about it, with 15 deep water ports, with the logistics, with the opening of the Panama Canal, there's great opportunity in trade. Now, I get tickled in the facilitated area of international trade is because it's one that's often criticized, especially by our good friends in the media. They love to throw stones at Governor Scott or Lieutenant Governor Carroll on these missions. In fact, the Palm Beach paper had the headline that said, Governor Scott to make, and it had mission with the line drawn through it, vacation to Spain. Oh, what are they talking about? Now, let's just assume we didn't make any missions. What would the headline be? Lame governor doesn't promote international trade for the state. I don't get it. We are an international state. You're internationally influenced here in the Panhandle. We have to be aggressive. So I look at the 4 missions that we had this year for the governor. Before I got here, he went to Panama. We need to be in Panama. He met with Mr. Alamand, who is the executive director of the Panama Canal Authority. That's a powerful group. It's more powerful than the country of Panama. To have that relationship is so important. And I'm telling you, we are ahead in that area, and we have to continue to stay ahead. We have the Southern Governors Association. I think they're trying to take like something around a dozen or so governors to Panama later this year to start building those relationships. We're ahead. That's why you make those missions. You know, we go to Canada, we come back and we announce 3 foreign direct investments from the state of Canada. You know this from a tourism standpoint, 10% of the population of Canada visits Florida during this time of year. 10% of the entire country. And so, you know, you go to Brazil, 115 companies go to Brazil. We come back with over $100 million of orders from 115 Florida companies, Florida-based companies, doing business in Brazil. We just got back from Israel. We're still tallying the results there. But there are a lot of relationships with Israeli defense companies that we have opportunities to work with in aerospace, aviation, homeland defense, or even space. And so there are great opportunities there. My point being, we in facilitated growth, we are aggressive, just as we would be on competitive projects, and those are areas that we choose. There are other areas like the house out here at the Haas Center, the Small Business Development Network. We've got the Institute for Commercialization, and the list goes on and on. This is where the state chooses to put dollars. We look at our return, and we're getting the jobs from it. So we'll continue to look at that and the jobs that it generates. And the last point I'll make about job growth is in what I call the a lot of people like to just assume that's going to happen. That's kind of the organic growth. I mean, you got a market of 19 million in this state. So there's naturally markets here where people are gravitated to do business. But today, there are many, many businesses, many individuals and small businesses that look at, you know, where do I choose to start my small business? Where do I choose to locate branches of my big business? And there are choices. And so when you start looking at those choices, what I like to think about is, and this is what Governor Scott is really focused on, is what drives those choices. Often, it's the ease of doing business. That's why Governor Scott's so focused on removing some of these unnecessary regulations and the burden cost of doing business. If it's costing you to just go through state of Florida bureaucratic red tape, that money is coming off the bottom line. It's keeping you from hiring employees. And so we have to work at that. So that's why thousands of these regulations were worked on in this last session, and we'll be working on again this session to make it easier to do business. Now, I use this as an example, and again, I believe in, and I'm just not saying just don't do anything, just let everybody business go, and you've got to have planned growth. You do your job, you plan where businesses can locate, but you make it easy and understandable on how they get through the process and start their business. The example I like using is Darden Restaurants is headquartered in Orlando. You know Darden from Denny's, but you know their restaurant chain. But we just kind of take for granted they just pop up on a corner. Well, that company doesn't make decisions like that. Neither do any of these companies. But Darden shared with me when I sat down with them, they had a planned growth of how many stores that they wanted to locate in 2011. I'm not going to tell you that number, but let's just say it was 50. 50 stores that they're going to open in the country in 2011. Now, they have hundreds of locations. They already know that the market's there. They know the land that they can tie up. They can go start today on over 100 or so locations, but they're only going to do 50. How do they make the choice? You know how they do it? They go by probability. 50 locations. Which sites had the highest probability of being open a week earlier than what's scheduled? So let's say half, 25 of them opened up a week earlier, 25 weeks of additional revenues to their bottom line. That's big. That's big to a company like Darden. And the same, the opposite of that is true. If there's probability they're going to open a week late, I don't want anything to do with those locations. Ease and understanding of doing business. Businesses get that they need to be regulated. They understand that there's a process. What they don't understand is I jump through the hoops as you told me, and then you come back, oh, wait a minute. You didn't do this, and we got to come back again another 30 days and go back to this review board or this commission or whatever. Panhandle gets this. You guys do a very good job of working with business. There's some other parts of the state that can really improve their game. So we've got to get better in that game, in that organic growth, and I kind of like to think of it as organic growth on steroids. And so in closing, let me say this. If you look at those three areas, you look at our team working together, I think we got a bright future in our state. One of the things that in Governor Scott's State of the State that just really stuck out with me, he has a lot of quotes and a lot of them have been picked up, but I really thought what he said describing Florida really hit home with me. He said Florida is a place where bold people come to build their dreams. I thought, wow. That is really a very visionary statement, because if you think about it, it's true. So if it's the entrepreneur that's building their dreams, if it's somebody that's in the tourism industry, the space industry, if you want to do commercial space, come here and build your dream. And to do that, we have to focus on those three areas. I'm excited about what we're doing. I'm excited about the direction. I look forward to working with you and as we partner to continue to grow and maintain what we have here in the defense industry, diversify this economy. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the show today with Grace Swoope, the President and CEO of Enterprise Florida and the Secretary of Commerce for the state of Florida. I'm your host, Larry Sassano with the Economic Development Council. Have a good day, have a good week, and please join us again. Thank you.